She also appeared on Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered." New York Times opinion piece says we should abandon the idea of masculinity. "I'm way ahead of you," said one man.
Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld just tag-teamed the unthinkable, obliterating Howard Stern's ego in a takedown so ruthless it echoed through radio waves and late-night sets alike. What started as a subtle shade turned into a full-blown verbal demolition, ripping through Stern's carefully curated persona like a hot knife through vintage vinyl. No filters, no mercy. Just two cultural juggernauts exposing the king of shock-jock radio as a hollow relic grasping for relevance in a world that's long since moved on.
I'll say this, Dagan. I thank God for Howard Stern because he does make me feel normal by comparison. Because I'm like the Fox recluse. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. But he makes me look like, Pete Davidson on a...
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Like, his wife rescues cats. That's her job, apparently, her thing. But you can get toxoplasmosis.
That's true.
Cryptosporidiosis.
AIDS.
And
no, you can't.
No,
but
you can't get.
No, you can't.
But you can get.
I mean, what are the chances I get that again?
Because he had the affair with Jessica Hahn,
right,
who was the secretary, the hot secretary, and Jessica Hahn wound up Sam Kinison, and they had
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They had a terrible breakup. They would talk shit about each other on Howard Stern.
What do you think of what Howard's become recently?
Well,
he's the only person I know who's gone, other than Penn maybe, who's gone from being red-pilled to blue-pilled.
That's a spectacle, not just a takedown. This was a Category 5 ego hurricane aimed directly at the last remaining hairs on Stern's heavily curated head. If Howard thought he was still the king of edgy radio, Joe and Greg just handed him a mirror and said, "Look again, Your Majesty. The crown's plastic and the throne's been repossessed." It all began like a slow boil. Joe Rogan, that effortlessly alpha podcast juggernaut who can dissect quantum physics one minute and elk hunting the next, decided he'd had enough of Stern's latest lecture tour.
But that's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
Fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years in a $20 million beach house. I mean, you have no idea how tiring it is walking all the way from the wine cellar to the tennis court and back. Do I sound jealous? Yes.
Look, what he did, I mean, look, people to this day, they make fun of Howard Stern because of who he is now and the way he behaves now. That guy's the man. He was the pioneer. When he was the king of all media, and he was telling everybody to suck his dick, and the FCC was going after him, the government was fining him.
Yeah.
They were fining his businesses millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And he was out there doing wild shit on the radio.
He was putting a Klansman on with Young Thug.
Now he's woke.
If you're enjoying this video, please make sure to subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon. If you are enjoying this breakdown, please make sure to subscribe. Howard's been moonlighting as a moral compass lately. Because nothing says, "Trust me," like a guy who spent decades asking celebrities how often they wax. And Rogan? Oh, he didn't hold back. With that signature smirk and a tone that says, "I lift kettlebells," and truth, he let it rip. He didn't need to shout, just calmly dismantled Stern's newly acquired holier-than-thou persona like it was a defective squat rack from Walmart. The guy who once bragged about naked strippers on live radio was now wagging fingers like a yoga mom policing juice bar etiquette. The irony? So thick you could grill a steak on it.
The right is insisting on free speech. They were the motherfuckers that were censoring everybody.
Right.
They wanted to lock Howard Stern up in jail.
I was on Howard Stern's show. He was great at that time, and then he went woke. And since he's gone woke, his ratings have gone down the tubes, and he sort of went anti-Trump for a couple of reasons.
They sued him. His parent company had to pay untold amounts of money. How much money did Howard Stern's company get fined? It was hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. Insane amounts of money. The government was trying to shut down a radio guy for talking
He was very angry at MAGA. He said, "We've got to stop MAGA." And I'm saying, it's Make America Great Again. You know, it sort of doesn't work so well.
And now that's the left. It's just patterns, man. It's just patterns where people can justify certain behaviors because it aligns.
Howard Stern telling people how to live, Rogan muttered, like it physically pained him. That's like Ozzy Osbourne giving TED Talks on pronunciation. Boom! Just like that, the entire illusion of Howard's self-reinvention began to crumble. Not because Rogan was being mean, but because he was being accurate. The dude wasn't attacking a person, he was peeling off a mask. Stern wants to be taken seriously now, after 3 decades of fart soundboards and boob countdowns? That's rich.
Hours.
Yeah.
And he was out there doing wild shit on the
He was
radio.
putting a Klansman on with Young Thug or
and
not
now,
Young Thug.
and now he's woke.
Miami.
It's crazy.
Trick Daddy?
Trick Daddy.
Yeah, he has to be, though, because if, dude, the skeletons, that guy.
Yeah, look at this.
God hates.
Oh, and she
No, there's
escaped.
also Hollywood Squares, but yes.
Okay.
They used to bring them back all the time.
But just when you thought it couldn't get more devastating, in walked Greg Gutfeld, smirking, caffeinated, and ready to turn the wreckage into a comedy set. Gutfeld didn't tiptoe, he kicked the door down wearing tap shoes. With the precision of a stand-up comic who moonlights as a political assassin, he began painting Stern as a washed-up rock star who traded leather pants for judgmental cardigans. The visual, immaculate. Howard Stern now acts like your aunt who watched one documentary on climate change and won't shut up at Thanksgiving, Gutfeld quipped, barely hiding his glee. And the roast didn't stop there. He compared Stern's evolution to watching a wolf slowly decide it's more fun being a poodle. Same fur, none of the bite, all bark, and instead of howling at the moon, he's scolding it for cultural insensitivity. The crowd? Losing it. And not just with laughter, with relief. Because finally, someone had the guts to call out what everyone's been thinking. Stern, once the rebel voice of a generation, had turned into a parody of himself. A man so desperate for legacy points, he's willing to rewrite his entire history with a Sharpie and a prayer. Rogan continued twisting the knife with that signature intellectualism meets bar brawl tone.
There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, you know, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last, but they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists. He's living in the Hamptons. What would the Stern of now think of the Stern of before?
He broke down how Stern went from fighting censorship to becoming it. How the man who once railed against corporate overlords was now sipping oat milk lattes with them in corporate retreats. He's gone from flipping the bird to the establishment to applying for its internship, Rogan said, eyebrows raised, like he couldn't believe it either. Meanwhile, Gutfeld was dancing around the smoldering ruins, throwing verbal confetti like a New Year's roast. He riffed on how Stern now books guests based on how socially acceptable they are instead of how interesting. It's like watching a punk rocker throw away his guitar and join a book club, he sneered. The only thing shocking now is how boring he's become. And it stung. Oh, it stung. Because beneath the hilarious burns and the devastating analogies was a truth Stern couldn't outrun. He's lost his edge. He didn't age gracefully, he softened, and not in a wise grandfather kind of way. No, in the way that makes you wonder if the guy who once reveled in pushing buttons has replaced them all with safety locks. Rogan brought receipts too. Episodes, quotes.
This week on his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, dude, call me woke as you want. I'm not for stupidity, but I am woke, motherfucker, and I love it.
Oh dear, he swore. He swore that'll win over the woke.
Contradictions stacked on contradictions. He replayed the difference between then and now with clinical precision. One moment, Stern's grilling Pamela Anderson about breast implants on air. The next, he's lecturing Joe Rogan about platform responsibility. The whiplash? Unreal. Like watching Evel Knievel become a school crossing guard overnight. And just when Stern fans were hoping someone, anyone, might throw him a lifeline, Gutfeld circled back for the encore. This time, he brought metaphors. Howard Stern is like an aging magician who keeps pulling politically correct rabbits out of a hat no one asked for, he chuckled. You remember when his tricks were dangerous? Now it's just balloon animals and safe spaces. The room was shaking. But it wasn't hate. That's what made the takedown so brilliant. Rogan and Gutfeld weren't foaming at the mouth. They weren't rage farming or ranting incoherently. No, this was surgical mockery. The kind that cuts not out of spite, but out of necessity. Like watching a once great artist refuse to acknowledge they've painted themselves into a beige corner. They even tease the idea of a Stern comeback, but not without biting sarcasm. Rogan joked that all Stern needs is one more fart button and a stray stripper pole, and he might just remember who he was. Gutfeld offered to lend him a spine if he ever finds the urge to challenge power again, instead of sipping tea with it.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about. This is a guy who once joked right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You gotta wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate.
The real mic drop moment came when Rogan said, Howard doesn't fight the system anymore, he sends it holiday cards. The crowd roared. Stern fans, silent. And that silence said everything. What Joe and Greg did wasn't just comedy. It was exorcism. They dragged out the ghost of Howard Stern's former self and made it sit in the room while his current incarnation squirmed under the spotlight. It wasn't cruel, it was cathartic, because deep down, people missed the old Stern, the boundary pusher, the disruptor, the man who said what no one else dared to say. By the time they were done, the audience wasn't just laughing, they were nodding, because in a world overrun by safe takes and virtue-washed talking heads, there's something refreshingly brutal about two guys saying what everyone else is thinking, but too scared to utter, especially when it's aimed at someone who used to make a living doing just that. Howard Stern didn't just get roasted, he got unearthed. His contradictions, his moral gymnastics, his desperate rebranding, all of it laid bare in a comedic autopsy performed by two masters of the mic.
This definition of woke, it's if you call someone a know-it-all, you're not complimenting them on the breadth of their knowledge. You're saying you don't know as much as you think you know. So yeah, woke doesn't have anything to do with vaccines. What it really means is sort of a slavish devotion to left-wing ideology and then repeating it so you can get social credit.
Right.
That's really what it means.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're smarter than anybody. And he had said in another part of this set, because I believe in the science. Well, if you believed in the science, you wouldn't be hiding out like Howard Hughes.
And now, well, Howard has two options. He can either lean into the persona he's constructed, a cautious, careful echo of what he once was, or he can take the hint and rediscover the edge he buried under layers of celebrity approval and self-righteous reinvention. But one thing's for sure, Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld didn't just criticize Howard Stern. They reminded the world why he needed to be criticized in the first place. And just when the verbal dust began to settle, Rogan leaned forward like he was about to reveal a deep cosmic secret and asked the one question that cracked the whole Stern facade in half. Do you even like yourself anymore, Howard? Boom, not a punch, not a jab, an existential haymaker. You could hear the silence of a million boomers who grew up idolizing the wild-haired rebel, now wondering if they'd been cheering for a hologram this whole time. Gutfeld, never one to let a raw moment pass without twisting the knife just a little deeper, jumped in like a caffeinated sniper. Howard used to be radio's mad scientist, he said. Now he's the aging substitute teacher who hands out detention slips for using the word crazy. The imagery? Ruthless, accurate, almost poetic, if poetry came with a laugh track and a can of Red Bull.
So they fucked with him for 14 years. 14 years.
And that's not paid by the station, that's paid by him.
fined owners of radio station licenses that carried the Howard Stern show. A total of $2.5 million for content and considered to be indecent. Indecent. Like, why do you have those rules? Like, why do those rules exist? To keep obscenity from television and, like, maybe that was a good idea in 1950 when people didn't know any better.
But they weren't just making fun of the man, they were dissecting a cultural implosion. Howard Stern wasn't merely a celebrity, he was once a symbol, a walking, talking middle finger to conformity. And now he's more likely to wag that finger than flip it. He's traded rebellion for reverence, shock for safety, edge for Ellen. Joe Rogan circled back with a metaphor so lethal it could have been weaponized by the Pentagon. It's like watching the Joker become a mall cop. Laughter erupted. But beneath it, disappointment. Because whether you loved or hated him, Howard Stern used to stand for something. Now, he stands with whoever's trending on social media and against whatever idea might cost him a dinner invite in the Hamptons. Gutfeld started listing all the things Stern used to mock mercilessly. Hollywood hypocrisy, political phoniness, virtue signaling, the cloying desperation of fame seekers. And now, Greg said, pausing for effect, he is all of them, combined. You could practically hear Howard's old soundboard trying to power itself back on out of sheer shame. But then came the kicker. The part of the roast that stung more than any joke ever could.
The big thing. Do they still call it Sirius XM?
Still Sirius XM, and I've heard that it's Howard's money.
Yeah, but he has so much. Well, first of all, if he leaves, they're
oh yeah,
because that's like how many subscribers will bail when that guy leaves.
Dude, I did Howard Stern show 3 months ago, and I thought he wasn't in the room, but the way they have that set up is you really believe he's in the room, like almost like a hologram.
They tricked you.
Dude, I was talking to Howard Stern, but he was in Long Island or wherever he was, Florida, and I was in the city.
Rogan and Gutfeld weren't just calling Stern out, they were inviting him back. With every insult, every jab, every devastating metaphor, there was an undertone of challenge, a dare. A whisper beneath the satire saying, come back to the fire, be dangerous again, say something real. Because in the end, what they mourned wasn't the fall of a man, it was the erasure of a voice that once dared to speak the raw, unfiltered truth, no matter how ugly, uncomfortable, or off-limit. A voice that didn't care about sponsors or tweets or how many retweets came from blue-check therapists on Instagram. Now, that voice is buried under layers of publicists' carefully worded statements and an approval rating curated like a Pinterest board. Gutfeld leaned back, his smirk fully weaponized. Howard Stern didn't evolve, he said. He got neutered by fame, by fear, by the same machine he once shattered with a single sentence. And Rogan? He delivered the eulogy. Calmly, clearly, with a sense of melancholy that somehow hit harder than all the barbs combined. You can't call yourself the king of anything, he said, when the only thing you challenge now is your assistant's coffee order. Silence. Then laughter. But not the carefree kind. The laughter of people who just watched a legacy get packed into a storage unit. But Rogan wasn't done. He painted a final haunting image. Picture this, Stern, alone in his multi-million-dollar mansion, surrounded by echo chambers and expensive art, replaying old clips where he actually meant what he said. That's the ghost that haunts him. Not regret, but relevance. And yet, beneath it all, you could still sense that Rogan and Gutfeld weren't rooting for Stern's failure. They were begging for his resurrection, because they know what Stern once was. And they know what he still could be if he ditched the fear, burned the PR handbook, and remembered who the hell he was before corporate brunches became his war zone.